Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Niche Cast. This is our weekly Aotearoa sporting podcast coming at you from the Niche Cache, the niche-cache.com, where we have all sorts of Aotearoa sporting yarns to read about. I've put the Kiwi NRL spotlight on Tamaire Martin, as well as Stafford Toa with the Tigers. Got a fresh Aotearoa Warriors diary entry. Wildcard's got the Flying Kiwis up live. We've got a Sean Marks NBA debrief as well. All sorts of Aotearoa sporting yarns to be had on our website. And this is our weekly podcast where we sit down, have a big old kōrero. If you're listening to this, you might have been listening to the variety show as well, which is a bit more hard and fast. And we also do a Patreon podcast for our Patreon whānau. So shout out to the Patreon whānau. If you want to support the Niche Cache and our mahi in broadcasting Aotearoa sporting excellence, join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/our Niche Cache. That link is in the description, the bio. Sign up. Extra podcast every week, as well as just the good vibes of supporting us. And what else do? We publish a email banger on a Monday and a Friday evening with all sorts of relevant Aotearoa sporting notes that fit outside the big old website yarns, bit more quicker, bit more fresher, current eventy as well, and just whatever tickles our fancy. So sign up to that and you get all the podcasts, you get all the links to our content sent to you as well. So that is via Substack. And you'll also find that link in the bio below. That's what we do pretty much every day. That's who we are. And we start our podcast Wildcard with a dose of mindfulness. But this is one of the rare occurrences where I am going to hijack the mindfulness with something that I thought about when I was meditating on what I was going to write for my Aotearoa Warriors diary. And it's something that applies heavily to the Warriors, but also is a beautiful thing of life. And the mindfulness that I've chosen to hijack the mindfulness segment of our podcast with is the reliability of nature is soothing. For the Warriors, this means the reliability of nature is evident in the Warriors and what they do. We know who they are. We know what they do. And it's soothing. I'm actually finding comfort in the Warriors being the Warriors in all their natural elements, which is quite nice. Especially when you're going against the grain of how everyone else is viewing the Warriors, then that's when you get a bit of soothing energy coming in, because I'm relying on the nature. And of course, in a non-sporting context, the reliability of nature is incredibly soothing because every day the sun rises. There's the cycle of seasons, like whatever dramas might be happening, nature's always there. It's always reliable, and thus it is soothing. And we believe in the spiritual powers of Aotearoa. So that only heightens the reliability and the connection to nature as well. So I'm just having a big old soothe session with the reliability of nature to start this podcast, Wildcard.
Soothe session. Yeah, that when you said that at first, the first thing I thought of is about the way that because then you later said about the sun rises each morning. It's exactly the image that came to my head when you said the reliability of nature. It's just like the world keeps turning. Tomorrow's another day. The sun is going to rise. Birds will be chirping. The trees will be doing whatever trees do, rustling in the wind, growing ever so slightly, growing slower than the human eye can perceive. Those little things where it, I guess, makes you feel like you're a part of something bigger and I guess eternal as well. Something much greater than just like your average human day-to-day struggles. We're part of this big natural cycle that's just constantly replenishing itself, and that is a soothing thing. I think that is like a kind of it takes the pressure off. It takes the pressure off of everything else.
Let's crack into some sporting matters. We've got a little bit here. Fresh dose of news, Wildcard. Your main man of Aotearoa cricket, the CDG, getting jiggy
The notorious CDG.
Colin the Jiggy has signed with Surrey in the county championship. And this is a fresh development that is quite interesting because it adds another player to the Kiwi county tour. We've got Will Young batting for Northamptonshire, and now we've got Colin de Grandhomme adding his all-round talents to Surrey. Obviously, this is a niche cast topic because you love a bit of CDG. I love a bit of county championship cricket. So it's a good bridge between the two. This week, I'm not sure if Colin de Grandhomme is going to play for Surrey because they're playing their next game starts overnight tonight. Thursday night, they are playing Gloucestershire, and not sure of the logistics of Colin de Grandhomme's arrival quite yet. Whereas Will Young will be playing against Essex in the county championship Division 1. Both teams are in Division 1. So Colin de Grandhomme will be playing Division 1. Colin de Grandhomme's going to Surrey, who are currently first in Division 1. 3 games, 2 wins, 1 draw. Will Young and Northerns down the ladder, they've got 2 games and 2 draws. So Colin de Grandhomme is stepping into the best county team right now. Will Young is doing his mahi with a solid Northerns team. As we know, Colin de Grandhomme, not part of the IPL, but he's going to be part of the test squad. So it's a similar case to Will Young, where the blokes who need to be playing county cricket ahead of a test series against England in England are doing so. Will Young scoring runs. We'll wait and see what Colin de Grandhomme serves up with Surrey.
Yeah, that's a nice one because de Grandhomme will definitely be part of that squad, but because he's missed a bit of time with injury and whatnot, might have been sort of like touch and go as to playing or not. Like there's sort of, I don't know, 8, 9, maybe even 10 positions that are pretty much locked on, unless they decide to pick, depending what they do with spinners or whatever. The Black Caps pretty much know what their test 11 looks like, and de Grandhomme used to be very much a part of that. Now is maybe just because of some of the time he's missed, sinking just a little bit. Remember, he did have one absolutely outstanding knock against South Africa, and he's bowling as much as he did, so I would guess he's more likely to play than not. But if you are on that sort of in that place in the squad, you want to get your reps in, and you want to find some form ahead of what could be an important, probably like must-win series. Like the Black Caps are going to have to get a win or 2 from this series if they're going to have any hope of making the Test Championship final, to make up for dropping a couple wins that they would have expected to get at home, in particular the Bangladesh one. So great timing. It's exactly the kind of moves you want to see guys making. And it's also cool because it's Colin de Grandhomme playing, because when you said he's signed signed to play in England with some county stuff, my picture at first is, well, I hope it is like the county stuff and not just like turning up in a month or 2 for the 2020s like a few other Kiwis often do, because that is maybe the impression that if you don't follow Colin de Grandhomme particularly closely, you might get of him. He does have a reputation of being like, he's a big hitting batsman and whatever, and that generally vibes more with the 2020 stuff. But as we know from following the dude intricately, his best format is the longest format, and his 2020 stuff is probably his least effective format, at least internationally. So it's nice to see that recognized as well, and Colin de Grandhomme getting an actual like county gig and getting to play some 4-day cricket, and hopefully nicking away a few wickets and churning out some ballistic runs and getting in good form to absolutely demolish England in a month's time.
I've just got the County Division 1 Crick Info homepage up here, and the first story is headlined "Fast Bowlers on the Clock as ECB trials radar guns to satisfy England's need for speed. Jamie Overton tops 90 miles an hour at the Oval, according to new speed gun data." Colin de Grandhomme's going to be bowling 120k. He's going to take wickets. He's going to bang sixes. It's all good. No worries. And I wonder what Colin de Grandhomme's like on a basketball court, wildcard, because I haven't seen him in the flesh shoulder to shoulder with another big bloke to really, get the size measurements together. But everyone talks about how big he is. And while you're talking about Colin de Grandhomme, I was curious. I did have a little mental image of Colin de Grandhomme on a basketball court, his mullet flowing, big unit, bit of Zion about Colin de Grandhomme maybe, bit of a chunkier lad, gets around the park quite well, good hands, athletic, good hand-eye coordination, probably a good shooter, get him down in the low post. Colin de Grandhomme, bit of a baller, I'd say, but the ECB's fascination with fast bowling won't be applied to Colin de Grandhomme. But as we know, Colin de Grandhomme and Will Young probably going to perform pretty well in county cricket and then take that into the England series where Aotearoa will roll England 3-0. In the NBA wildcard, in actual basketball, I was imagining Colin de Grandhomme like trying to do all the NBA media. Like, that's not happening. It's going to be very strange. Like, he's a fascinating listen, old CDG, but probably not when he's being peppered with all sorts of questions. We do have some NBA matters to discuss here with Steven Adams and Sean Marks kind of in the same space as our Warriors and Phoenix trend that we have discovered and stumbled upon, which we'll get into later in the show, of just the sheer volatility of their mahi. Steven Adams, prior to the series, we said it could go either way. I wasn't quite prepared for the extremities of those either way situations. And then we got Sean Marks, who, Kiwi running the Brooklyn Nets. And it's a bit of an awkward situation where we like what he's doing. We like who he is. But apparently the players run the franchise, and Sean Marks and Steve Nash, I'd suggest, they are complicit is like a bit of a dramatic word. I'd say they're comfortable with it. I think they're trying to drive a player-led organization, and Sean Marks understands that. He's a former player, so he's allowing the players to have their say and how the organization's run, and all that stuff is all good as well. I'm just not sure like what else there is to say here, Wildcard. Like, we know, like, basically Steven Adams isn't playing in the series. Hopefully Memphis win, and Steven Adams, because they'll play the Golden State Warriors, and then Steven Adams can get back into a normal rotation. So I don't think like there's much to add to the Steven Adams yarn. He's not playing in this series. Hopefully Memphis win. He should play in the next series. Sean Marks is a Kiwi in a super awkward situation, and it's kind of just wait and see. I don't think there's too much to add to the Sean Marks discussion, because it's all wait and see. There's so many wait and see elements that I think we're going to learn from with how Sean Marks is doing his job as a Brooklyn Nets boss man. I'm sure you're going to spin a yarn and add something new to the Steven Adams and Sean Marks discussion. I'm setting it up as like, I don't think there's anything new. Like, we kind of know the situations with both clubs. Maybe my question to you is, what have you learned? Like, what's one thing you've learned with Steven Adams over the past week? And what's one thing you've learned with Sean Marks over the past week as well?
I can also add one thing I've learned about Colin de Grandhomme over the past 5 minutes, which is that he's 1.84 m. So it's not out of the realms of basketball height there. A little bit on the shorter side compared to an NBA player, but local league, he could fit in. I could picture him.
He's also shorter on the NRL forward.
Yeah.
Like you're going to struggle to get a gig as an NRL forward if you're below 185, 186.
Yeah, which is like 6'2", 6'3" kind of range, I think.
But he's a good size for a center, NRL center.
Yeah. Big shoulders, so he can...
a nuggety loose forward in rugby union, point guard in NBA, which would be very strange, but continue.
I picture him as like a Luka Doncic type player in basketball, not quick off the pace, but just gliding around in a way where you're like, this dude's deceptively big, and he shouldn't be able to move like that, but just those smooth movements, it's kind of how he bats. He doesn't do a lot, but when he does, it's just ball goes flying a mile. Or the way he just sort of wheels his way into the bowling crease, very slow pace to bowl a nice straight wicket to wicket line. Obviously not with the extremity of Luka Doncic's production, but so it goes. I think one thing I've learned about Steven Adams, and I agree, there's not a whole lot that's changed on. Like, he got another DMP in the fifth game, and is to the point where it's actually a little bit frustrating because Xavier Tillman, who started ahead of him and who started starting ahead of him, I think from the third game onwards, and like Tillman did great. Like, he earned that in that game 2 when Steven Adams got early foul trouble. They benched him at that point, and Tillman came in at a really good game, sort of unexpected one. And then Minnesota kind of adjusted to him quite easily, and I think he's been actually quite poor in the next 3 games starting. The flip side of that is that Brandon Clark, who was the backup through the regular season and is still the backup to Tillman now, who's like just first and third of swap places. Brandon Clark has been outstanding, and I think he was essential to them winning Game 5 with this sort of fourth quarter run there. Absolutely huge result there, and Ja Morant getting the layup towards the end. He gets the credit, but they don't do that without Brandon Clark's efforts. I think he's been borderline, maybe even Memphis. I mean, Desmond Bain probably has been their best player through this series, but Brandon Clark is up there, right there with him. He's been superb, but yeah, like it's been a frustrating thing to watch because Morant's really struggled to get to the rim. And he said this, he isn't playing above the rim like he usually would. He had a triple double in, I think, the third game, and they asked him, and people like Memphis media were fawning over it, being like, man, this guy's got a triple double, and he's probably going to come up in the media and say, I didn't even play that well. And then they asked him that, and he's like, well, I didn't play that well. Like, look at my shooting percentages. And it's true. Like, he's struggled to score at the rate that he normally does. And it's hard not to think that the absence of Steven Adams' screens are a major part of that, and creating that space for him to get to the rim unchallenged and to lay things up. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been disappointing as well because, while he's out there, he's great, but he has such a high foul rate, and he's been asked to do more because Steven Adams isn't on the floor, that he's fouling just as quickly, if not more, and then isn't able to be a factor, which is where Brandon Clark's excellent work off the bench comes in handy, because he's really picked up that slack. But they haven't got what they normally want from Triple J either, and I suggest not having Adams there is also a factor in that too. So there are ways where, like, he's going to get torched by Towns if he plays, but maybe let him get torched by Towns for 10 minutes a night so that you can at least have 10 minutes of getting jump, especially if it's in like the first half, 10 minutes of getting Ja Morant some points on the board earlier on and some easier opportunities, hopefully getting Jaren Jackson Jr. through to halftime with 2 or fewer fouls, that kind of thing. Maybe it's not the worst thing to get some minutes out there, but I'm not confident that'll happen. I think he will play more of a part of a rotation if they can get a closeout win over game 6 or 7. It's they're 3-2 up now, first to 4, so best of 7. So I think he would come back into the rotation for Warriors. I don't think he'll go back into the rotation anywhere near what he normally would do through the regular season, though. I think it's still going to be sort of limited aspects there, because we know how Golden State like to play small, and Steph Curry's been amazing, and Klay Thompson's back. Draymond Green can always facilitate stuff, and Jordan Poole fella apparently is amazing too now, and that's a tricky task. So I don't think we'll get him playing like 25, 26, 27 minutes a night or anything like that, even in that series, but hopefully he will actually get to play some. But I think the thing that I've learned from that is just looking around the NBA and the other series, it's pretty stock standard stuff. And we should probably have come to expect this by this stage in just the process of the NBA, the progress of the NBA, is that centers across the board just shrink in the playoffs. Like, the game is faster, it's harder for them to stay on the court. Everyone else is trying that little bit harder, and so you've got guards who are leaping 3 feet in the air to grab rebounds and stuff like that. It's just everything kind of impinges on what the center's job during the regular season is. I think you see this just in general, where it's hard for centers to play in the playoffs. Even someone like Rudy Gobert, who is one of the 2 best defenders of the last 5 years in the NBA, along with Draymond Green, is getting targeted by the Dallas Mavericks. Like they're just playing this spread offense, and then getting Gobert to where he doesn't have any help, and then someone, Doncic or Brunson or Dinwiddie or whoever is just attacking him at pace, and they're making real hard work for Rudy Gobert. And if Rudy Gobert is struggling, Steven Adams is going to struggle too. Like, and every other center, Andre Drummond in the Brooklyn series, bit of a non-factor. Like guys across the board who have that kind of skill set. The only guys who are really, it's like Bam Adebayo and fellas like that who are just overskilled for that role. I think this is just a normal thing. It's probably best to because there's individual context all over the place with the Steven Adams thing, but part of the wider fit is that centers in the NBA come playoff time don't really this is just normal. This is what seems to happen year after year. It's really hard for them to get minutes in the same way. And it's worth just keeping that in mind. If you want to chuck anything back on that or not, otherwise I'll try to think of something I've learned about Sean Marks.
Yeah, just like let's assume people know the whole story with Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets. So you don't need to outline everything that's happened. Just give us a crisp nugget of what you've learned about Sean Marks and his situation.
Well, I don't think there's anything new that was learned from this situation. I think the learnings and the new stuff is what happens next. I think that's where it gets really interesting. And that's what is kind of fascinating about the situation they find themselves in. Because if you look at what happened this season, it's like the season from hell, Kyrie Irving's not going to, it's as much as this was his fault and just being a bit of an idiot, but at the same time, he's not going to have to hold out for the bulk of the season next year. He's going to be fully available. Durant hopefully isn't going to bust his knee. Joe Harris should be back. They've just had so many. They're not going to have a Harden situation, or they might have a Harden situation because they've traded him for Ben Simmons, which maybe doesn't make things necessarily better, but we'll see how that goes. And I think that's a very important part of what happens next, actually, because everything you said about them trying to drive a player first organization, well, here's the ultimate test of that. Here's this guy whose brain is pretty much shot. He had this humiliating playoff series last year, got basically booed out of Philadelphia to the point where it feels like I don't know, it feels like that must have just been something extremely traumatic to him, to where there's actual baggage he has to get through now in order to get back on a basketball court. And this is the test of that for Brooklyn. They've set themselves up to be the kind of team who can allow star players who are going to lean into that side of the culture a bit more and let players have a bit more of a say and whatever. And maybe that is how you get the best out of Ben Simmons, is to meet him halfway and say okay, we will indulge you a little bit in some of these things. You had a back injury, couldn't make it to the playoffs. Okay, that's frustrating, but we accept that, and we're going to work with you over the offseason. What do you need to get to this position? Sean Marks had a meeting with Ben Simmons and agent Rich Paul recently. They talked about this. Okay, well, let's just get it all on the table. You want to be here, you want to play for us? Yes. Okay, sweet as. So what do we need to do to help you get to that point, sort of thing? So this is really an ultimate test of that, because if they get Ben Simmons out there playing the way he did in Philadelphia, his shot's not going to magically get better. At least you can't expect that. But he's an all-NBA defensive level player who can pass as good as anyone out there. And if you surround him with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry there, or Patty Mills or whoever, Joe Harris is another one, shooters just across the board. He doesn't need to be a scorer. He doesn't need to do anything other than be able to get the ball to the open shooter. And he can do that in his sleep, and he defends really well. So he's an amazing fit for this team if they get him fully engaged and whatever. And that's the test. That's the key is to moving forward, because we saw against Boston, you can't just be a two-man team. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant were the two best players in that series, and they lost because Boston had a full team who could just have couple very extremely good players themselves. But the team effort that they had, crowd out Kevin Durant, make it physical on him. He's tired. He's been playing huge minutes lately. Just make it as hard as possible. Done. They beat them by doing that. They need more help. Ben Simmons is the guy who can do the most to help them, because they're not going to have a lot of cap space to work with when you've got those three guys on max contracts anyway. And that's the trick. Like everything from here on, it's okay. You've put your cards on the table. You've said once you got Durant and Irving, like this is the direction we're going in now. Forget everything that came before, how we got here. Like this is what this team is now. Here's the test of that. Because if they get Ben Simmons to that point, they're a championship caliber team again. If they don't, well, things might get frisky, and we'll see how that goes. I don't think Steve Nash's job is under any threat either, by the way. I think he's still chummy with Kevin Durant moving forward, sweet as. And that's it. Like that's the test is next season, what's Ben Simmons doing? And Sean Marks has got to figure that out right now. Like, how do they get him to there? And that's it. Like that's the off-season target right now.
So Steven Adams' major learning is that big men around the NBA, it's kind of stocks down at the moment. And Sean Marks' big learning from the Brooklyn Nets being knocked out of the NBA playoffs with everything that happened, his mahi starts now, which is kind of crazy considering everything he's already been through with the Brooklyn Nets. But that's the Kiwis in the NBA, and it's a beautiful thing. As niggly as it fucking feels, it's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
Football wildcard. I'm checking through your Flying Kiwis, your weekly Flying Kiwis yarn this week, and lots of little bits of information. All the lads are firing around the world. All the big Donny lads, all the low-key lads in the Scandinavian leagues and the Division 2s and the wherever else Flying Kiwis football mahi goes down. Just to keep a lid on our discussion here, I am most intrigued to ask you about the big Donnies on the women's side of Aotearoa football, Abby Erceg and Ali Riley, who are competing in the American League. We got Ali Riley, Angel City, and Abby Erceg is holding it down as a hearty leader of the North Carolina Courage. What's happening there? Because I just checked your Flying Kiwis yarn, and they're top of the charts. I'm not sure if that's any level of priority in how you whip up those yarns, but they're top.
Yeah, definitely is.
And they are both we all know them. Kiwi sports fans, football fans, us as the niche cage, we all know them as two of Aotearoa's best ever female ballers. And they are the best, two of the most senior, experienced players in the American Women's National League as well. So what's happening there right now? Is this like they are playing this weekend, their season's starting? Talk to me about Abby Erceg and Ali Riley as Kiwi wahine in the American Soccer League. Remember that America, USA as a nation, is the best women's football nation in the world. So the women's competition in America is quite good as well. They are leaders of these teams, which is pretty epic as well. So just break down, yes, as good as you can, what's happening with them, just on what's happening right now. We don't necessarily need the context of all the years past or what their future context looks like as well, because there's a World Cup coming. That's cool as well. But what's happening right now that is intriguing you about Abby Erceg and Ali Riley?
Yeah, so we've just finished the group stage part of the preseason NWSL Challenge Cup, which is a competition they brought in around COVID when they couldn't do the full competition, and then just decided to keep it going because it was good fun. And it effectively operates, their group stage is like the preseason now. And North Carolina Courage were great. Like they've rebuilt their team quite a bit. One of the few constants has been Abby Erceg at the back, who basically, like, she did some media stuff earlier in the week, and she pretty much just said, like, this is my team. I never once considered leaving. You don't just like walk off when things are on the downswing. You stay and rebuild and make it work and be a part of the tough times as well as the golden times. And so that was all like, that got some extremely positive fan reaction from around North Carolina and their fan base there, as it should, when you get like the captain speaking so effusively about your team like that, which then led to, I think, her getting first of all, the coach was asked about that, and he just said like more golden quotes about what a great leader she is, what an incredible human to have in the team and a great player on the field and all this. Best centre back in the world, he said, which I've been trying to say for several years. I don't know about best centre back in the world, but she's definitely a lot higher up that list than she gets credit for, I think. And if she played for America, she would probably be a starter for America and would have won a bunch of World Cups, and I think that situation would be perceived a little bit differently. So then she got mic'd up for their last game, which was cool because you got to hear her team talk and all this. So it was like, I definitely recommend having a peek, at least at the first section of that Flying Kiwis thing, just for the Abby Erceg stuff and just, a nice indicator of a top tier leader at work and what that looks like and how that's represented. So that was cool. They got a good result in their last game, drew 2-2 against Washington Spirit, 2 undefeated teams. They finished top of their group, which means they go through to the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup, which is cool. So they're actually in position to potentially challenge for that title now, which is awesome. Not where Ellie Riley is. She's at an expansion club, Angel City, who drew their first game, which was nice. They had like Wellington Phoenix women's first game vibes about it. Drew 0-0 against a fellow expansion team, but then lost a bunch of games after that, bringing them up to their final game of the regular season when they won 1-0 against, I think it was Portland, a Portland team who needed to win to have a chance of making the semi-finals, and they beat them. They scored a Kristen Press penalty in the first half, which there was a few cool photos going around of Ellie Riley being one of the first to get up there and celebrate with Kristen Press. From this game, coupled with when they were both going to college together, a dozen years ago or whatever. And it was Ellie Riley celebrating with Kristen Press after she'd scored a penalty that day as well. So there was a bit of a time warp thing going on there, which is awesome. But yeah, their first win for the franchise. So that was a pretty historic day for them as well. So a good week for both of those two, leading into the start of the league itself this week. And guess what? Angel City FC are hosting their first ever NWSL game against the North Carolina Courage. And the funky situation you're going to get here is not just Abby Erceg against Ellie Riley, but you're going to get Ellie Riley captaining against Abby Erceg. Like, they'll be doing the toss beforehand and everything, the coin toss. That I've been racking my head since I saw that was going to happen. And I'm sure there must be some examples of this at some point in history. But I can't think of another time when 2 New Zealand internationals would have captained professionally against each other in a club game ever. Maybe there might have been a situation where the Wellington Phoenix were in that place, although Alex Roof is their first full-time Kiwi captain. So, others have filled in along the way. Maybe there might have been a scenario. But I can't think of one if there was, and I certainly can't think of any in further overseas context. So this could actually be quite a sneaky historic occasion there, where you got Ellie Riley captaining against Abby Erceg, the 2 most recent captains of the football Ferns, teammates for so long at national level. I honestly can't think of another scenario where something like that has happened. So I'm extremely looking forward to that one. I'm just going to be watching that with the screenshot button going ping, 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 ping. Expect them to be leading next week's Flying Kiwis as well from that respect.
So is Abby Erceg, her in North Carolina preparing for a solid, maybe upper tier type of season, and then Ellie Riley and the Angel City there, as you compare them to the Wellington Phoenix Wahine, they're trying to just settle into a grind, win the odd game, try and draw as many games, and you probably lose a few games as well. And Katie Bowen is with Abby Erceg at North Carolina as well. Correct?
Yes, mostly sitting on the bench. She got on the field for 1 game in the Challenge Cup, but only one of those 6 games, whereas Erceg played, I think, every single minute. And I think Riley probably went somewhere close to every single minute as well for them. Captaining the expansion franchise, I should mention as well. So yeah, I did mention that, but it's worth pointing out that they chose her, and the team that has Kristen Press and a few others. Julie Ertz was going to be in this team, but she's pregnant, so congrats to her and the whānau. Julie Ertz married to Zach Ertz, I think his name is. He won a Super Bowl as a tight end with the Philadelphia Eagles. I assume he's still there. No, I don't think he's still there. I think he went to like Kansas or something. I can't remember. But yeah, nice American sporting family there. But she's not playing this season. And Ellie Riley was the one who was chosen to whereas Abby Erceg has captained North Carolina for like the last 5 years. Ellie Riley was chosen specifically, and she wasn't even an early addition either. They could have drafted her in the expansion draft, didn't, ended up trading for her like a month later, and then made her captain. So that says something about like an instant impression of a quality leader as well there. So we're talking up Abby Erceg's leadership for all the right reasons beforehand. Got to give that shout out to Ellie Riley equally and oppositely as well.
I'm just going to push in the scrum and win the ball here. We referenced the like Shea Ili and the Kiwi NBL lads who were like top of the charts up for some awards. Was I correct in seeing that Shea Ili actually won Sixth Man of the Year in the NBL?
He did win Sixth Man of the Year.
Ooh.
And I saw the voting tallies for the Defensive Player of the Year that he was nominated for as well. And that it's Antonius Cleveland. I can't remember his first name. Someone Cleveland won it. But the voting tallies was like 47 votes for him, 46 for Shea Ili. So he was literally like right there as well. A couple votes, like if one of those votes had swung in the other direction, he'd have won DPOY as well as Sixth Man. So fantastic season from him. And of course, he's still got a very prominent role to play for Melbourne United as they chase another NBL championship and semi-finals starting, I think, either tonight or tomorrow.
I'm just checking here. Tasmania. Melbourne United versus Tasmania starting tonight. 28th, 7:30, so about 9:30 Aotearoa time. Shea Ili playing for Melbourne. What else do we have here? We got the Hawks versus Sydney, and it's those two series. So who else is involved here? You said Tom Vodanovich
is on Sydney, and that's about it. Melbourne did have. I think Melbourne got Dion Brewster as well, but I don't think he really gets minutes. I'd have to check that though. That timing's awesome too, because 9:30 New Zealand time means it's going to start right after the Nuggets Hawks. I can't remember what the first game is, but the first game of the Aotearoa NBL is on tonight at 7:30 or something along those lines. And then obviously throughout the weekend from that point on. So the Kiwi League's about to start. It will be a little bit understrength for the first week or so because you got a few guys who haven't come back from the NBL yet and will play but won't turn up for a week or two. And some of them have finished their regular season last week, but will probably get a week off before actually starting. But yeah, that one's ramping up as well. So nice timing with the setups there.
So Shea Ili, he's a big Donny with Melbourne, Sixth Man of the Year, up there with Defensive Player of the Year. Tom Vodanovich is a high-quality Aotearoa baller as well, likely to get a fair amount of game time with Sydney. And then you said Dion Brewster is a bit of a depth player for Melbourne. Also, we've got the Aotearoa NBL, as you just said. Are there any names that you're like just flirting with right now leading into the competition? Like you said there's no big names, none of the big Donnies are playing just yet, but is there anyone else who you've just like seen their name in a team list and you're like, oh, that looks cool, or just a little bit of like a splash of intrigue just to set it up?
I mean, like Dan Fotu's playing for the Tuatara, which is pretty cool because he had a really good last year of college. Isaac's younger brother, few guys like that, like his teammates with Dante Russo-Nance, who's a young guy who's worth keeping an eye on. Is
he still in Aotearoa? Russo-Nance, he's been playing the last few competitions, right?
Yeah, he's signed up for the Tuatara as well. Who also have Rob Lowe, who's another. That's going to be a fun team to watch actually, because Rob Lowe, as we know, kind of got shafted by the Breakers through the middle of that season, where he probably should have been playing a lot more than he did.
No shame there.
No, the Breakers did get, I think it's Simon Edwards is his name, who was made Administrator of the Year by the NBL, which is, I think, a little bit more to do. He is the general manager, but this is not a Sean Marks general managership. We all know this guy is not the one who does the player recruiting type stuff. In which case that was a shambles this year, so should not have been getting any awards. But I think this is more in reward to the Mahi for like
booking the
having
hotels,
to base the
doing
team.
the laundry,
yeah, exactly. Having to book the team in overseas and that kind of thing. In which case, fully deserved, like for sure. But yeah, we've got to separate those two aspects of the general managership when we talk about that one.
He's more like the helpful parent part of the team circle. They'll bring the oranges, they'll do the laundry, they'll drive the bus, or they'll fill out the team sheet,
which needs doing. Like that's an important job. So yeah. And also I think there's an element of the NBL throwing a bone to the Breakers after making them live in Australia for 2 years. You know, I think there's an element of like, we see it, we recognize it.
You guys
we might not do anything else to help you out about it, but we will at least give you a nice like token gesture. So that's cool. And it's not also that by all accounts, old mate Edwards is just like a top bloke. So deserves it certainly ahead of other Breakers guys who might be.
Fair play.
Yeah.
So just in summary, so we've got the Australian NBA Finals, Shea Ili, Tom Vodonovich, and Dion Prewster. The first thing that came to your mind for the Aotearoa NBL was some of those Tuatara players. So Rob Lowe, Russo Nance, and who was the other one?
Who was the other one? Dan Potter. Yeah, well, they're I'm just looking at Tony O'Connor's on Twitter's thing. They're the first team that came up. So
yeah, it's okay. So those are just some summary notes, and we'll be sure to touch base with those things in the coming weeks as well. None of that was on the agenda to discuss, so we'll. I'm glad we did discuss it, but we got to keep moving into some Wellington Phoenix football, and then we'll get into Warriors versus Raiders and Kiwi NRL. Maybe we just cut back on the Phoenix here, wildcard, just a little bit, because it looks as though the Wellington Phoenix they've got their final spot sealed because they are currently 5th on 36 points. They are playing Melbourne Victory, who are 3rd on 42 points, and Sydney FC are on 31 points. So if there's one game left, Sydney FC might crack into the top 6. But it's unlikely to be at the expense of the Wellington Phoenix, which makes that win at Eden Park really important, right? Like, especially coming after the drubbing in Wellington, get up to Eden Park, 1-0 win, and essentially book a final spot by the looks of it. Victory are pretty good. Wellington Phoenix are volatile. So that sets up an uncertain clash coming up this week. What do we got? Friday nighter in Melbourne. So it's an away game for the Wellington Phoenix at Melbourne Victory. Are you putting much weight on this performance coming up? Like, what would you, out of 10 out of 10, like, holy fuck, the Wellington Phoenix really need to win this game? Like, maybe Eden Park last week was a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, just to set the scale. This week against Melbourne Victory, final spot is already kind of booked. We know they're volatile, so there's every chance that they lose 6-0, especially given what happens in Melbourne at this time of year. Where would you put the weighting of this performance on a scale of 1 to 10?
I mean, we'll separate out the same as separating out the general managership from the arranging the rostership type roles. I think got to separate like performance in terms of how well they play from results, because I haven't worried about performances for at least a month because of that volatility, because they're so up and down. And generally all that matters at this point, when you've been like, you can't expect them to be a fully functioning machine when they've got all these like changing parts constantly through injuries and just the regular games and not getting rest in between, all these kind of things. COVID outbreak doesn't help either. They've had 2 of those. Nor having to bounce back consistently from like big defeats when things do go awry. So I haven't worried about how they play for a while, but the results are all that matters. Just find a way to grind them out. We're at that stage of the season where we'd probably be getting to that anyway. And I'm not quite as ready to say that they've secured their final spot. One more win over the next 3 games will definitely do that, because MacArthur can only get to 38 points, City can only get to 37 points, Phoenix are currently on 36 points. So one win will do that. They've got Melbourne victory. They're all away games, by the way, the rest of them. Melbourne victory, Western Sydney, and
I hadn't
Melbourne
gone
City.
to the May section of the Wellington Phoenix draw, so I viewed this as their last game. But there's 2 more games in
right.
May. So
in which case your maths would have been right. But yeah, there are 2 more games.
Give me a number. Give me a number. What are you waiting? Like, how in tune are you with their performance for this week out of 10?
So I think about a 6, because it's not must win, but also you really don't want to be leaving it too late to fly. And especially when that last game is against Melbourne City, who beat them 6-0 not so long ago, you don't really want to be risking that one so much. That would be a Melbourne City team, hopefully, maybe a rested team last week. They might have already done the minor premiership by then, although Western United have a game in hand and a hovering within range of them. So maybe not, but
6 out of 10.
6 out of 10, because you don't want to leave it too late. You want to get that thing nice and secure. And then the other thing to keep an eye on is they're not going to finish any higher than 4th, but they are only 1 point behind Adelaide, who are currently 4th, and that's with a game in hand. So if they do get more wins than not over the last 3 games, I mean, if they somehow win all 3 of them, they will finish 4th place. I was thinking maybe could they catch 3rd in that case, but I'm not going to bother trying to work that out.
Don't worry about.
But 4th place is important, because 4th would mean a home semi-final.
Right.
And I think a home semi-final versus an away semi-final is a massive difference, because we just saw at Wellington, even though the Wellington result wasn't very good, but at Wellington and then Auckland, the kind of crowd they can expect for that is pretty hectic. So like that would make a massive difference in their chances of actually winning a finals game as well, if they can get to 4th place and hopefully get that. So assuming that's possible, like that's the season, like that's a major aspect in whether their season can be successful or not, is like if you can scrape in 4th, if you can get that home semi-final,
But that home semi-final would be played in Aotearoa and not like at Redcliffe.
That's what I worry about, but I assume probably, they should be able to get it at Sky Stadium in Wellington. I would hope so. Because
like you bust your ass. I
won't say 100%, because we know how these things go.
You bust your ass for a home semi-final, and then it's played in some like suburban Australian ground that has no value to the Wellington Phoenix.
Yeah.
Who was your best on ground for that Eden Park game?
I was thinking about this after the game, and I was struggling to come up with someone.
There was plenty of ball love in the commentary, like just his work rate and just how his socks, stayed around his ankles. A lot of that shit, bit of razzle dazzle for the goal as well. The
moon boot that's been on his foot for in between games.
He was getting plenty of love, but just who was your best on ground to wrap up the Phoenix chat?
David Ball often does get a lot of love, and I think sometimes that maybe goes a little bit too far, because he does border into that thing of being like, he works extremely hard. He never backs down. He's playing through like a really painful injury at the moment and all this, like the kind of stuff that people love because it fires everyone up. But also, like, I tend to think about things a step further and be like, yeah, but should score more goals. Should probably set up more. Like, it's nice to work really hard, but do you have an end product as well? Which David Ball does, but he's not like as an import player. It's not like he's above and beyond some of the others. So I love the energy. I love the work rate. I love the passion from him as well. But I also think sometimes people only look at that and forget the fact that he has also missed some good chances. And does make bad decisions sometimes in attack.
Like you're just describing a battler. Like it's all good.
Yeah.
You need a battler in your team, a job, or a role player. But
you do. It's whether you could maybe get that as well. Like if he were to leave, maybe you could also get that from like local guys as well at some point. But that's not where the squad is at right now. They need a foreign guy to come in and set that tone. I'm going to say maybe I think Finn Sermon needs some love. Finn Sermon, very like teenage centre back. watched him heaps for the Phoenix over the last couple of years for the under-20s team. And he was always a player I thought, like, this dude's good. Like, this dude's got something. He's a very good defender. He's got good size for a defender, makes pretty good reads. He's comfortable on the ball. Does have a lot of errors in him. Like, he would get sent off now and then. He would score own goals now and then. He has actually scored an own goal for the Phoenix senior team. But I've been shocked at how quickly and how well he's progressed since he's gotten an opportunity with the first team. And it does make you wonder about some of this player development stuff sometimes. It's like sometimes the opportunity is where the development happens. And some players just thrive on that. Like, you give them that chance. They might not look better than their peers up until that point, but which Sermon probably did, to be fair, because he was playing with guys a year or two older than him. So he was like above his wave anyway. But like, chuck him in a level above that, and some people can just like it can be sink or swim, and he has been swimming for the Phoenix, and I thought he had his best game yet for them in that Western Sydney game, where they did a lot of defending, especially in that second half, and needed that. They couldn't have got away with a weak point in the back three, which an opposition team might well have been looking at, the like 18, 19-year-old centre back who hasn't played before this season, and the guy to target. Like, just get physical with him, get some runs in behind, get him double guessing himself. But no, he was excellent. He made a couple great challenges in the penalty area where he really absolutely had to win the ball, and did. Winning his headers, I thought he had a really excellent game. And Scott Wooden next to him was also extremely good, and I think has been a major part of Finn Sermon looking as good as he has over the last couple of weeks, is being able to play with a composed, controlling centre back like Scott Wooden, who can just, teach him all the dark arts, So I'm going to give Finn Sermon that shout. Whether he was literally the man of the match, I don't know, but I think it definitely is. Like, what he did was enough to get a spot on the podcast, at least.
Is he from Wellington?
He's actually from Christchurch, but moved to Wellington to play for the Phoenix Academy when he was, 15, 16, something like that. So
got a bit of regional recruitment from the Wellington Phoenix, and
there is.
I'm kind of stumbling over the many connections to the Warriors, because the Warriors just signed Dejan Arce, also from Christchurch. So there's a connection there. As we know, if there's one team that can rival the Wellington Phoenix for volatility, that honor does go to the illustrious Aotearoa Warriors. And you also said something about player development can sometimes just be opportunity. Because a lot of the things that I've been thinking about Kiwi NRL-wise is just opportunity. Like, Stafford Toa left the Newcastle Knights, and he is doing all right with the West Tigers because of opportunity. Like, it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, because Michael Maguire is someone who I think loves a lot of these young Aotearoa players, and that connection helps him provide the opportunity. So he wants to connect with Stafford Toa. He wants that. That's just how Madge, the coach, operates. So he's going to give he believes in Stafford Toa to play centre at the NRL level. Whereas at the Newcastle Knights, Stafford Toa is like a second string winger. So it's to get that opportunity, you need someone to believe in you. And those things, that's interesting. It's like the, what do they call it? The fascia. In your body, got the fascia tissue. That's why you roll it out. You get on the physio roller and all that shit. Those are the kind to me, that feels like the fascia element of player development. Because it's not yes, there are the bones and the muscles, which are coaching in the more obvious things. But if the coach believes in you and gives you the opportunity, that is just as beneficial as coaching and all those other things that we tend to, the obvious things about player development. And I'm curious how that applies to Dejan Arce, who burst onto he scored a try on debut that I included. I actually had to jack the video on Twitter and then put it in the Warriors yarn, because he scored a try on debut against the Panthers in 2020, where he got the ball, stepped off his left, and then was shot out of a rocket to the try line. since then, he hasn't been able to like consistently get selection in the Cowboys team. 1 week, like it was kind of the end of that Paul Green era. Then Todd Payton comes in and he's changing everything. So Dejan Arce debuted as a half, and then he was playing center for a bit. Then he's in reserve grade. Then he pops up at fullback. Then he's at center. He's doing all this and all that. I kind of just wonder if someone at the Warriors believes in him and can give him an opportunity that might work out well for Dejan Arce and the Warriors. And a lot of those other like Kiwi NRL lads, like people like Hayes Perham or Paul Turner, who left the Warriors. Other clubs believed in them, and Paul Turner's yet to play NRL since leaving the Warriors. Hayes Perham's got an opportunity. So I think a lot of those Kiwi NRL lads that we're seeing in the NRL right now, which I did predict because I learned from last year that early in the season, the Australian coaches like to stick with the stock standard, the Aussie veterans, all that type of stuff. Here we are in round 7, and Kiwi NRL numbers are up. Like, sure, there's the stocks down type of players that I discussed, like someone like Morgan Harper, but at the same time, Hayes Perham suddenly starting on the wing for the Parramatta Eels. Simi Sasangi has been playing as a middle forward for the Newcastle Knights. Now he's starting at center for the Newcastle Knights. Like these type of little things, whether it's Stafford Toa, all these little things happen when you're a couple rounds into NRL footy, and there's suspensions, there's injuries, there's dramas, there's all sorts of shit. Like suddenly Christian Tuipulotu is starting on the wing every week for the Manly Seagulls because Tom Trbojevic is out. It's all there. Things change. Things move quickly. Suddenly, Te Maire Martin is a starting fullback for the Brisbane Broncos. Last year, Te Maire Martin was chilling in the Waikato. Now he's a starting fullback for the Brisbane Broncos. And it just takes a bit of the NRL season, the NRL grind to shake things out and end up, because a lot of the depth is Kiwi NRL depth. A lot of these clubs, their young players are Kiwi NRL players. So we're kind of seeing that shaken out, which brings us wildcard to the Warriors versus Raiders. 2 bottom 8 teams. As always, there's always worse teams than the Warriors. There's teams who lose more than the Warriors. There are teams who actually have drama around their club. The Raiders are one of those teams. Like, the Raiders have just been in the news for dramatic reasons for the last year and a half kind of thing. Like, you think back to a player doesn't get selected for the Raiders and their missus is, in the media kicking up a fuss, or Josh Hodgson wants to leave ASAP. George Williams wants to leave ASAP. Like, these are key elements of a dramatic club. And I don't know, they got Viking clapped last week. That's a bit embarrassing. So we all know what happened with the Warriors. And I actually had to really think about how I was going to write about the Warriors without actually mentioning what happened on Anzac Day. And I'm continuing to do that because I think it's quite funny to do so. But it is to say that the Warriors, while they didn't have the embarrassing Viking clap against them moment,
there was some other embarrassing moments.
It was kind of similar. And they will like to play another game of footy as soon as possible to get that out of their system. I don't believe these are bounce back games, because if the Warriors are trying to bounce back and the Raiders are trying to bounce back, it cancels each other out. And what we're saying is they're just 2 bottom 8 teams going up against each other. It's not like one's a top 8 team that had a shit moment and now they're trying to bounce back. No, they're just 2 teams where they are and they're playing against each other this week, which feels quite similar to like the Storm Warriors rivalry that I like. No, it's not a rivalry. It's just a game. This isn't a bounce back game for either team. it's just a game between two mediocre footy teams. Like, let's be honest, let's keep it real here. So it is a home game, and maybe you see a bit of the Redcliffe faithful giving the old Viking clap to the Canberra Raiders. So that could be good. Do you have any Warriors vibey stuff here, Wildcard, coming up against the Canberra Raiders? What are you thinking about? If you got any questions, what do you need to know? I do see that your Dragons are facing the Tigers, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that I love the Tigers because they're the Aotearoa Tigers in every sense of the word. So obviously the Dragons are going to lose that game. Hopefully golden point win or 1 point win for the Tigers to keep that streak going. Great performance from Stafford Toa. Beautiful. But what do you want to know about the Warriors Raiders? What are you thinking about? What are you pondering?
Well, the main thing I'm pondering doesn't quite mix with the it's not a bounce back game idea, because the thing I was thinking is like, when you, I don't know, I think when you compare like a sport like rugby league, where there are a lot of points scored generally, more so than usual in that Warriors Storm game, with a sport like football where there's generally not a lot, I think you can kind of get a semi-similar idea of how a game went if you just sort of go like 1 goal equals 10 points kind of scale, in which case effectively the Warriors lost 7-1 in football terms, like translating it, loose translation, but loose translation is about a 7-1 loss, which is kind of the same thing as a 6-0 loss, which the Wellington Phoenix had a 6-0 loss not that long ago to Melbourne City. And they're still in position to make the finals, where they're probably they are more likely than not to make the finals. They probably will get there. Like, they're 1 win away from securing that with 3 games to go. So the thing with the Phoenix is that wasn't even an isolated incident either. Like, you're hoping with the Warriors that it will be an isolated thing. They're not going to start like losing by 40 points more often than not. But the Phoenix have 6 times lost by 4 goals or more this season. 4 of those 6 times, including on the weekend at Eden Park, they've come back and won the very next game. So it definitely is a bounce back thing with them. And they've shown an ability to bounce back more often than not, which is pretty incredible when you think about what the alternative could be. Like, you get thrashed, you just lose your heads, you lose confidence, you can't get back up, you go away from the things you've been doing well when you had been winning, and then it just sets in and losing becomes a habit and whatever. Like, that's the risk you have after a big loss like that, is it can really just utterly destroy, shatter all your confidence. The Phoenix have shown that that's not an issue with them. They can get themselves back out of those scenarios. The Warriors will have to prove that. Like, that's their thing, right? Is they now have to be like, well, how do we not because it's one thing to say like it's a flush the dunny and move on kind of performance, which clearly is, but you're not flushing the dunny and moving on if you still have that kind of like lingering effect of it, or the memory, or the trauma even of a result like that. So I think it's the easiest thing for them, and it's the easiest thing to say is like, we will it's done, we've addressed it, we'll be accountable in the ways that we need to be accountable, but we're not going to dwell on it, or whatever, the kind of things that Nathan Brown has said, the kind of things that coaches do say in those situations. But I mean, we do need to see something different, because that one got out of hand. I went to bed at like 5. I think they just kicked a goal to go up, like to take it to 50 points. And I'm like, well, I've seen enough. Little did I realize they were going to keep scoring at exactly the same rate. So shocking stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Do you see that being a thing where they like, that is something like a shadow that hangs over them? Or do you think they have that kind of Wellington Phoenix ability to just like shrug it off and be like, that was a bad day at the office, but it's not going to happen again. And this is throwing it back all the way to the start, like the sun has risen, nature is replenishing, and that is a soothing thing. Is that something you think the Warriors have in them? Or maybe we just don't know yet.
There's where they are right now is just where they were 2 weeks ago. So it's not like they have to do anything different because they beat 3 teams who are even teams with the Warriors. They beat the Tigers, they beat the Cowboys, they beat the Broncos, who are generally in the same situation as the Warriors. Then you face the Roosters and the Storm, you lose both games, and like I don't care about the score against the Storm. I don't care that it went the way it did. Because the Storm do that to a lot of teams, and they can very quickly turn a tough game into a big win. Like when teams were putting 50 points on every team last year, it was the Storm who did that. So like the Storm can do that to any team. But like the Warriors are cursed. So a lot of shit went against the Warriors in that game against the Storm. Young players were playing roles they don't usually play. There was some sort of traumatic incident in the game, which visibly had an impact as well. Like you brought up the whole score, the game and everything. I'm not even thinking about that. That game didn't exist. It did exist because they lost to the Storm in that sense. They lost to the Roosters, they lost to the Storm. But I'm not entertaining this idea of how they lost as anything to change the Warriors. Like the Raiders stink. So all the Warriors need to do is just show up and play how they played against the Broncos. The Warriors just need to show up and play how they played against the Tigers or the Cowboys. That's all they need to do. They don't have to do anything astronomically different. If the Warriors play how they played against the Roosters, they'll probably win this game. So that kind of just frames everything where, yes, they did lose to the Roosters and they did lose to the Storm, but nothing from that Storm loss changes my perception about the Warriors. The only thing that game did was spark up an abnormal amount of mainstream media attention. Like you look at the mainstream media and suddenly the mainstream media are churning out stories about the Warriors. None of those stories were there after they lost to the Roosters. None of those stories or content was there when they were winning games. So maybe it's just like I'm so emotionally neutral and numb with the Warriors that those type of games, like as I said earlier in the podcast, I do the opposite of the mainstream media. So when the mainstream media is whipping up a fuss about such a loss, I'm going the other way. I'm downplaying the loss. I'm ignoring it. I'm not even doing anything else. I'm just straight up ignoring it. So it's like when that happens, that's why I'm not like bounce backy. And I'd say like the Phoenix, their volatility you'll know better than me, but it seemed to be opponent this week, big win, big loss. Opponent next week, big win, big loss. Whereas the Warriors, it seems more related to who they're playing. So I'm not sure if that's the case with the Phoenix. Like their big losses came against the best teams, and their big wins have come against the worst teams. Like, is that true?
Not necessarily, because 2 of those big losses were against Central Coast, who aren't currently, who might end up in the top 6, but they're not currently there. Exactly. Like those were anomaly results for the Central Coast Mariners. So yeah,
exactly. So if the Warriors lose to the Raiders by 50 points, then it's a bit of an issue. But then it's also more similar to the Wellington Phoenix. Whereas if the Wellington Phoenix, like their volatility was based on, okay, every time you play a top 3 team, you lose by 30, 40, whatever it is. And then when you play a bottom team, you win by 3 goals, 4 goals, 20 points, whatever it is. The Warriors, everything, like the Roosters and the Storm are the best NRL clubs of my lifetime. So if I believe the Warriors are a bottom 8 team and I have no expectations for this season, I don't care what they do against the Roosters and Storm. because I have no expectations of what they'll do against the best NRL teams, clubs of my lifetime, who can, in a click of a fingers, smoke you, as they have done numerous times before.
That's like when the football Ferns play against the USA and lose 5-0. It's like, yeah, but it's not important. Like these aren't the types of games that they're ever trying to target. I mean, the Warriors, if they were a stronger team, they would be hoping to compete with a team like the Storm. They're not currently at that place right now, though. Meaning, yeah, like when the football Ferns play USA, it's like, cool. It's nice playing against some of the best players in the world, getting a nice bit of like, some attention on the team and whatever. But like, these aren't the types of games that help you win the ones that matter. Like it's kind of like a throwaway in its own weird scenario. I can see that being a similar thing. I also forgot about the Dallin Watene-Zelezniak injury, because I think that's a very important point that you raised there about like the effect that might have had on teammates, because that was, as far as concussions go, that was a bad one. Like that was awful to watch. Which sucked on many senses. One of the more frivolous ways in which that sucked was it kind of spoiled what was an absolutely unreal highlight try assist from Nelson Asofa-Solomona with the up and under kick. I was never seen that before from every now and then you see like a front row or something caught in a situation where they might have to kick it on the last, and maybe they'll go with a little grubber or something. He just bombed it. They scored from it. It was awesome. But yeah, unfortunately, he followed through and cleaned out Dallin. So
when Nelson Asofa-Solomona, because you know how to like do a kick like that, you kind of have to. The kicking motion requires you to let go of the ball. It's not like you're holding the ball and then you hold it until your foot kicks the ball.
Yeah, like with the grubber, we can basically like place it on your foot and just step
even
through
with
it.
the grubber, like you're dropping it onto your foot. It's not like it's glued to your hand and then you bring your hand and foot together and you touch it out of your hand. You drop it onto your foot and you grubber it. Nelson Asofa is so big. When he does a kick like that, he's got to like biff the ball out. He's got to like, because his legs are so tall that it just looks so strange. And the other thing is, that kick didn't go where he wanted it to go.
Yeah.
He was trying to kick it to the corner, and he kicked it just past the far post. So it was emphatic. And it like, he's one of my favorite NRL players, Asofa-Solomona. And like, as long as like him, Fisher Harris, those type of dudes are in a Kiwis team, Brandon Smith, Joey Manu, like I think the Kiwis are going to be pretty good. But Asofa-Solomona is an absolute monster. And I'd say he's kind of underrated. Like everyone overlooks what he does on a weekly basis, which is be an absolute beast in the middle of the field and doing other shit like a kick like that. However, that kick was kind of off the side of his boot and it didn't go where he wanted it to go. So maybe if he kicks it where he wants it to go, it goes out to the corner. There's no dramatic situation there. The Storm don't score. The Warriors keep trucking along.
Curse.
It is what it is. I'm telling you. But like because that kind of changed the game. And then suddenly you're asking other players to do bigger roles. And yeah, that's cool when you're playing the Broncos and the Cowboys and the Tigers and the Bulldogs, no disrespect, the Dragons and the Raiders. So to segue into some like final thoughts about this game, the backline for the Warriors is Reece Walsh, Rocco Berry, Jesse Arthurs, Adam Pompey, Viliami Vailea. Walsh is in his second season. Rocco Berry's in his second season. Vailea is in his second season. Pompey is the senior veteran of that outside back group. Jesse Arthurs he's another one. He's player development is opportunity. Jesse Arthurs left the Broncos to join the Warriors, where he has got an opportunity, which is good for him. He is like the second senior veteran in that backline. That is an extremely young outside back group. And if you put that outside back group against the Storm or the Panthers, or the Roosters, whatever, like these best NRL clubs, they're getting lit up. They are getting attacking structures sent their way time and time again. They're getting bombs. They're getting a variety of kicks. Like Nathan Cleary is kicking Reece Walsh out of the game. Like those things are happening. And if you do that against the Storm, like if Taniela Otakulo, who is a dummy half, if he is asked to play out of position against the Melbourne Storm, it's going to be an issue because they are going to target the fuck out of you. Now, it's okay for Taniela Otakulo to get 10 minutes off the bench against the Roosters playing as a middle forward. That was exciting for me because it's a very basic role. It's a limited game time, and it shows his adaptability and embracing the challenge, as well as trust from the coaches to do that role. But if you're forced into Otakulo playing more minutes out of position against the Melbourne Storm, who have a bit of a mood going on, it's over. Which brings us to this Raiders game where I think the mix of the young players as well as the core of the Warriors team coming up against the Raiders, it's far better suited to a good game of footy. And I think I'm going to have to like figure out a scale for Warriors wins. This feels like a winnable game. I'll say that. This is a winnable game for the Warriors. Whereas if you roll the same team against the Storm, I think they're going to lose most of those. Like if you get 10 games against the Storm, the Warriors are going to lose 8 or 9 of them. But as young as this
10
team
and a half.
Yeah. This is a distinctly young Warriors team. And like, let's not forget, Viliami Vailea and Rocco Berry started round 1 as the centers. Now they are the starting wingers, which is fine. Like, I think this is, because I said this in the Warriors diary, like a lot of the Warriors signings they have the trend of versatility. Dejan Arce hasn't been able to settle in the NRL, but he can cover a lot of positions. He just needs an opportunity. Viliami Vailea and Rocco Berry started at center this season. Now they're on the wings. And you look at some of their next signings, Luke Metcalf from the Sharks, he can play fullback, he can play halves, he can play bench utility. Dylan Walker started as a center, then he's like maybe a bit of 6. Now he's like a ball-playing middle forward. Marata Niukore. At the Warriors, he was an edge forward. Goes to edge forward / center. Goes to the Eels, and for one of the best teams in the NRL, he is playing middle forward, edge forward, and center. Sometimes each week, like in a different week. Like week 1, he's playing middle forward. Week 2, he's playing edge forward. Week 3, he's playing center for the Parramatta Eels. So I think there is a trend in Warriors recruitment to get players who can play multiple positions without it being like a detriment, because we always used to think like utility value can hold you back. Whereas I think it's just now it's a natural ability just to cover center and winger. Adam Pompey has played wing and center at the NRL level. So those things help you absorb. Like say if you've got Dejan Arce on your bench ahead of Taniela Otakulo against the Melbourne Storm, then you can deal with the outside back injury, the concussion, or, you know, like those things are happening a lot in NRL footy right now. And you need players in your 17 who can cover multiple positions for an in-game shift. And it's about being able to adapt to what happens in the game by being prepared for that. Because like if you're like the downside of this is that if there's an injury to a center and a winger in this game against the Raiders and the bench is as per usual, you're going to be looking at like, well, even then, Ewan Aitken has played center before.
A lot more than he's played back row.
Exactly. So you only need to bring in Katoa or Jack Murchie and then you just push Ewan Aiken out to center. And I just, that's the trend that I'm noticing with the Warriors recruitment, is that a lot of their players, they are recruiting and they have no issues recruiting, whether that be getting Australian players to come to Aotearoa upon their return, and no Peter O'Sullivan, and the Warriors have recruited Mitch Barnett, Dejan Arce, Marata Niokori. Like, these are good players, and Peter O'Sullivan is now working for the Redcliffe Dolphins, and it's no dramas for the Warriors recruitment. So I think that those are some key trends that are evident, and I'm looking at this team named to play the Raiders in what I have labeled a winnable game. There's a very young outside back group who can cover multiple positions. There's a very powerful forward pack that is still the same, still got a solid playmaking unit, and you've still got skill. You've still got, it's hard, like, prior to that Storm game, there was a brewing defensive something in the Warriors footy. All of that went out the window against the Storm. So because I'm viewing that Storm game as the anomaly, I'm just interested. Maybe here's a good way to sum it up. It's like, it's not a bounce back game. It's just the Storm came and went, and now we're left looking at what is, intact. The Storm blew through the Warriors town, and now we're doing like, okay, let's dust some things off. Let's just clear shit out to see what is still there. And I think that's it. Yeah, it's not a bounce back game. It's a game to see what is still intact for the Warriors, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sweep the driveway, straighten up the pitches on the wall, all them little things, just restore things the way they were before the Storm came along. That does make sense. Like, it's just one of those, I don't know, it's just one of those, you're going to have, like, they're not normally this extreme, but you're going to have anomaly games throughout the course of a long season. Like, in any sport where you have a kind of extended league play like this, there are going to be games where just for whatever reason, like just a bad alignment of circumstances means that you did not put out a reflective performance of what your team should be doing. And because they had that defensive, like, little bit of steel coming through there, because you saw it against the Roosters the very week before. They were pretty excellent defensively, I thought, in that game. Like, so with the Roosters, which led to an interesting kind of contest. And then we saw a similar kind of Roosters, I thought, performance against the Dragons a week later on Anzac Day, where the Dragons just had maybe a little bit more in attack, thanks largely to Ben Hunt, and were able to squeeze out a win, which borderline didn't deserve on the basis of the game, but you take them where they come, especially in a game like that. But there are always anomaly games, I guess is the point. And they just have to make sure that this is one of them, and it isn't something where there's like lingering effects where if you dwell on it too much, it starts to influence what you do going forward. You have to get back to the version of what they saw in that performance against the Roosters, where it wasn't the final product for sure. Like, there was still, especially in attack, we're building towards better things down the line, but they have to get back to that point so they can continue to build from that platform rather than whatever happens since. And sweep the driveway. Sweep the leaves off the broken branches and whatever, get things back to the way they were, right?
I think the Storm, like, it's more like you're one of these Alaska, bush people, and you discover like a cabin off in the woods, and like a bear's been through it. Everything's kind of dusty and just old, and it's like it has clearly been mangled, and no one's been there for a year or two. So you just get in there and you just brush things off, and you just see what is left of the structure and the mana of that little cabin that you've discovered out in the Alaskan wilderness, or maybe just down in the estuaries and the mangroves. One last point here, Wildcup. Other results in this round: Cowboys 30-4 against the Titans. The Knights 2 Parramatta Eels 39, Panthers 36, Raiders 6. The Warriors don't feel like the worst loser there. Now, of course, I've got a warped perspective where I can just ignore the 70-10 bit. But the Knights were disgusting. The Raiders were also a bit yucky and a bit stinky. And Titans, not much doing there. Those teams, like the Knights scoring 2 points feels a lot more dour than the Warriors' volatility. Some of those teams feel like they are stuck in mud, whereas I think that is different to what we're experiencing here with the Warriors and what we are explaining, where the Warriors just need to see what is left after the storm. Whereas some of those other teams in the NRL, as I said, there's always worse teams. There's always more dramatic teams than the Warriors. They have real issues they need to figure out. The Knights have apparently one of the best attacking players ever and the best player ever on their coaching staff, and they can't fucking score points. The Raiders got Viking clapped in Penrith. The Titans have an attacking-minded coach. They have the beast that is David Fafita. They've got a game plan where they throw the footy around. They scored 6 points against the Cowboys. All of those games and those teams and their performances feel more dour than the Warriors. And it's just a timely reminder. There's always worse teams. There's always more dramatic teams than the Warriors in the NRL.
And for what it's worth, the Warriors were actually pretty decent in the first half of that Storm game. Like that was a solid half performance where they were behind, but a couple of those tries have been against the run of play, and not like it was by far like a long way from a great performance because they were still getting sort of dominated in terms of possession and meters and stuff like that. And that pressure was going to toll eventually, and it did. And then a few other things meant that it told more than it needed to, but they weren't terrible in the first half. Like there's even within that game, there was stuff that you could use and build from and whatever and move forward from. It's just it did go awry at one point, and then it went extremely awry. But the Storm, as you say, they do that to teams. That's what the Storm, and maybe I don't know. So who'd you say the Knights lost to?
Dylan Brown, Hayes Perham, Maratini. Right. Corey wasn't playing Isaiah Papali'i.
Well, the Eels are pretty decent this year. But let's say you said the Cowboys as well had a big win. Well, the Cowboys aren't fantastic. Let's say Storm are twice as good as the Cowboys. Then the result, double that result, and you get somewhere closer to what the Warriors had against the Storm, didn't you? And that's some like I'm reaching a little bit with some opportunistic maths there, but it's at least you can do that kind of thing.
Mate, I'm reaching with just pretending like that game didn't even exist. Quick question: who is your favorite NRL player right now?
I don't know, because the teams I watch the most, the Dragons, the Warriors, and I struggle to pick a player from either of those teams at the moment. The Warriors because I watch them a little bit more dispassionately, and the Dragons just because even though they've had a couple of nice wins in a row, are quite a disappointing team in the whole. I don't particularly rate the direction they're going in, but I don't know. I don't know how to answer that or who to pick.
Ben Hunt, just pick.
Maybe if Ben Hunt or something after a fine before he might have shot up to the top of the rankings there with an excellent game on the weekend.
Dylan Brown is a contender for me, and I'd also go Asafa Solomona with that kick. That's my weekly update.
You know who I thought was the best player on the field in that Dragons Roosters game though was Joey Manu. They wasted it a little bit, but he was like untouchable at times in that match. He was like, when you see a dude playing at that level, that is a thrill, even when it's against your own team.
We talked about that in the variety show, and you can check out the variety show on the same place you are catching this podcast. Tell a friend. Every week, 2 podcasts from the Niche Cage, Aotearoa sporting related. Also, extra podcasts, lots of cricket chat on our Patreon podcast early in the week as well. Thank you for listening. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Cheer, cheer.